Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to get started in just another minute. We are waiting for additional people to join us, so we appreciate your patience while we wait for those additional people to join us. Thank you for arriving on time. Again, for those who just joined, we're giving it another minute for because we are expecting more additional people, so we are giving them another minute to join us. As we know, it is still the morning for many people, and we are giving them another minute to join us for this webinar before we get started. We have a question. Will the recording be emailed to you? Yes, the recording will be emailed to you along with the slides for today's session. So yes, you will receive a recording of today's webinar along with the slides for today's session. Okay, thank you for those of you who have joined us on time. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us for today's SCORE webinar, Consulting ABCs, How to Build and Manage a Successful Consulting Practice. Today's webinar is in listen-only mode, meaning you are on mute. We do recommend that you maximize your Zoom window for an optimal experience. For Q&A, you will be submitting your questions via the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. So we will not be using chat. We will be using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. You will have several opportunities for Q&A throughout the session and at the end of the session. Materials will be again sent to you after the webinar, and those will be the slides as well as a recording of today's session. With that, I'll turn things over to Karen Gershowitz. Karen.
Hi, everyone. We're still expecting a whole lot more people, so we'll just get started anyhow. Today's a really good day to be inside because it is hot and sticky and awful outside, so we'll just proceed with this. As Kendra said, there's going to be Q&A throughout. We're going to limit it to a very few questions after each section, and then we will have a longer Q&A at the end. So here's what we're doing today. The first is, are you ready to be a consultant? When we did, prior to your joining this seminar, we asked you to answer several questions. And the first one was how long you've been in business. And for many of you, in fact, more than half, you are thinking about it. You have not yet started in a consulting practice. And just for informational sake, about a quarter of you are consultants who've been in business for less than a year, and another quarter have been established for a year or longer. However, this is useful information for everyone. The next one is how to start, some practical considerations, including what was everyone's big question. And I say everyone, it was well over 60% wanted to know how to get clients. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, as well as some other issues. And finally, managing your business, the nuts and bolts, and then we'll have a longer Q&A. I want to start by doing a poll. Just so I have a little bit more understanding. It says question number 2, but it's really question number 1. If you've been working as a consultant, how much of your income is derived from consulting? And if you could answer that quickly so we can move on, it's just helpful for me to understand where you are.
And we'll give it a few more seconds for people to go ahead and vote. We have a few more votes trickling in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And now I'm going to share the results.
Okay, so there are a few of you, a very few of you, who are deriving your full income. About a third of you are more than half of your income, and the rest of you are below, which is not surprising, given that a lot of you have not yet become a consultant, and we have a lot of people answering. Let's go to the next one. And this is your consulting practice exclusively business to business, exclusively business to consumer, a mix of the two, or do you work with not-for-profits? And again, I'm doing this just so I have some understanding of who you are, so I can, as I talk, address some of these issues. But it's also helpful for everybody to know who else is out there. So if you could go ahead and answer that one.
We're going to give it just a few more seconds for people to turn in their answers. And I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. I'm going to share the results.
We've got a really good mix here. Okay, that's great. Good to know. All right. So we have a very interesting group of people who are doing all kinds of interesting things. I'm going to make a suggestion to you. As Kendra said at the beginning, you are going to be getting both the slides and the recording. So don't take notes about what's on the slide. What you should be writing down are the actions that you may want to take after the workshop. There are a lot of practical tips in here, things that you can do to actively start or ramp up your business. And those are the things you should be writing down. Particularly, I've done this seminar as a seminar many times. People come up with ideas, oh, I should contact so-and-so, or something along those lines. Those are the things you want to write down so that you remember them. Okay, so part 1, are you ready to be a consultant? And we're going to be covering the different consulting roles and what it takes to be a successful consultant. There are many people out there who try to be a consultant and end up not succeeding. Well, I want you to succeed, so pay attention. So let's start off with what is a consultant? And according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a consultant is a person who gives professional or expert advice. A consultant on business methods is one way. A person who consults someone or something. What we're going to be talking about today equally applies business to consumer, business to business, and both corporate and not-for-profit. And as we saw in the poll a couple of minutes ago, there are people out in the audience who are in all 3 of those categories. So no matter what you're doing, this does make sense and is pertinent to you. Being a consultant requires a lot of skills. Most important is you must be self-reliant. If you're used to having someone tell you what you should be doing on any particular day, or what your goals are, or what the projects are, and you don't think that you're going to be able to do that without some direction, this is not for you. you need to have a broad range of skills. And when I say broad, they are both knowledge-based and interpersonal. And those are equally important. If you have great interpersonal skills, but your knowledge level, you've been 2 years in an industry, that's not going to help you. Conversely, if you are brilliant at what you do, but you can't communicate, that's not going to help. Again, well over 50% of you said that you want to learn, how do I find clients? Well, having an established network is the best way to start, but you can also build one. It's hard work, but it is something that everyone can do. And the fourth piece is once you've gotten those clients, you need to provide them with real value. If you can't do that, you will have a client once and you'll never see them again. So we're going to talk about each of these specific items in great detail. And these are the things that you must do in order to build and sustain a business. So the first one is expertise. And this is something that you should be thinking about. What special skills, knowledge, or approaches do you have? One of the things that I asked prior to your joining was what industries and what's your focus? Well, they're all over the place, but there's a very large group of you who are in education, another very large group who are in healthcare related fields. There's a lot of finance, accounting, and fintech, and marketing, PR, social media. There are big pockets of you who are doing the same thing. That's with just the people who are in this webinar. If you go out in the world, there is almost no one who does not have a lot of competitors. And because there are so many competitors, you need to figure out what it is that makes you different from all of those other consultants. And the way that you do that is by understanding a few things. The most important one is, what are the benefits that your clients and your prospects really care about? What is it that they want from you as a consultant? And then do you emphasize them? And this could be, for example, that if you're in a technical field, you are really great at explaining technical details in a way that people who are not techies can understand. That's a major benefit. If there are 5 people who are techies who can do exactly the same thing, and one of them has great communication skills, that's the person who's going to be successful. The other piece of it is how well can you articulate those benefits to your clients? Sometimes you know what they are, but you're not explaining them in a way that your clients get what you're saying. I've seen that numerous times. And that's an issue that needs typically a lot of work. You also need a lot of soft skills. So it's not just, I said, it's knowledge and it's soft skills that are the 2 critical pieces. You need to have good chemistry with your clients so that they want to work with you. And chemistry includes a lot of pieces. It includes adaptability. When they have changes, can you quickly pivot to help them? Do you have empathy for them? I've heard people who I mentor who say, God, they keep asking for different things and it's such a pain and it's costing me money and I don't know what to do. And I said, wait a minute, put yourself in their shoes. Have you ever worked in a corporation and had your bosses suddenly change what they want you to do? Well, they're facing that and they're passing it along to you. So having some empathy for them and understanding their situation will get you a long way. It also helps to be a really good observer of people. And in fact, I was saying prior to this to Kendra that this is my first webinar, and one of the things that I'm hoping is going to happen is that I'm okay doing this because I can't look at you and can't observe you and see how you're reacting. Because in any person-to-person, even be it Zoom conversation, I'm looking for clues. Are they really listening? Are they nodding? Are they scowling? What is it that the person you're speaking with is doing? And then respond to that. You can often tell if somebody's not clear about something you're saying. Ask them. You also have to be good at conflict resolution and negotiation. You have to make everything a win-win. And that takes some skill, and there are ways to learn how to do it, but you need to learn how to do that. You can't be combative with clients. You will lose them. You have to have great time management skills. I frequently, when I was in the height of my career, and I didn't say much about my career, so maybe I'll go back for a minute. But in the height of my career, I was juggling 5, 6, 7 projects at a time. And I had lists and charts, and I knew exactly when my deadlines were and when I needed to check in with clients, because if I didn't, something was going to get lost. And then finally, the most important thing, having a sense of humor always helps. But I am going to stop for a minute and just tell you who I am, because I realized I didn't do that at the beginning. I am a marketing person, marketing strategy and research. I started, 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, in fact, at very large corporations, American Express and another company you probably haven't heard of, Emory Air Freight. I became a partner in a consulting firm, and then I went out on my own and have been an independent consultant since 1991. So I know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this a very long time, and I have been through a lot of situations. So going back to the slides, let's talk about communication skills. There are 4 components. There's thinking, listening, speaking, and nonverbal. Listening is absolutely critical. I have to tell you, I have seen more people speak and try to sell before they even understand what the prospect's issues are. I've heard people try to talk with clients and explain things to them that they already know, and it just irritates them. So the critical piece here is listening and thinking before you say a word. And when you do speak, you speak and you write with both clarity and authority. I love this quote. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. If you listen with the intent to understand, you will get much further. You also need to have confidence. You are supposed to be the expert. You need to exude that expertise and commitment. Clients want to work with someone that they know, they trust, they believe understands, and you reinforce that positive, confident image in every transaction and every conversation you have. And if you need to, practice if you're not positive. I often tell people I mentor role play, or record yourself and listen to how you sound giving a presentation, or get a friend or a relative to interview you and ask you a lot of tough questions and see how you answer them. It will help you enormously if you've role played when you get into a live situation. You want to be positive and confident and not in any way be hesitant. Here's the really tough one for a lot of people. You need to never give up. You have to be willing to sell and consistently look for clients. Getting clients is a numbers game. The more people you contact, the more likely you are to get work. And you have to do this even when you are in the middle of a project or you have a couple of clients, because you will get to something that I think of as the cliff. If you do not sell and are not always looking to get new clients, a project will end and you have to start all over again from ground zero. That's not a good place to be. And I know a lot of you hate to sell. I hate to sell. Everybody, well, there's a few people who don't, but most people hate to sell. It's going to be critical to your success. If you can't sell, go get a full-time job. You are not going to succeed. The truth is, many people feel imposter syndrome. Do I really know this? Can I, what value am I bringing? Get over it. If you've got the experience, you have the knowledge. Getting over it sounds easy to say, difficult to do. I go back to role play. It will help you enormously. A lot of people say, I'm too shy to sell. Again, I get it. But if you don't like talking to people and you don't like being in front of people, this is not the place for you to be. Some people say, I feel dishonest. Why am I selling? It feels dirty. It cheapens it. Well, if you're doing it right, in fact, that's not true. You really will be doing your client a favor, and that's what you want. And I'm going to explain that more in a minute. And the biggest one of all is the fear of rejection. Yep, you're going to get rejected. Not everybody you talk to is going to be interested. Not everybody's going to respond. That project that you really, really wanted doesn't happen. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's a numbers game. You have to do a lot of selling in order to close a deal. So what do? You hate selling. What do you do? I said before that you need to listen more than you talk. Listen first. When you're speaking with someone for the first time, don't immediately talk about yourself. Talk about them. Ask them what they need. What are their pain points? What are their issues? Then think about if you can give it to them. Can you help to get them through that pain point? If you can, you're helping them get what they want. And pitching your services isn't annoying to them. It's interesting to them. You're helping them to solve a problem that they have, or helping them to get to a different place. And if you're not taking care of your customer, you know what? Your competitors will. Remember we said everybody's got a lot of competitors? You can't do it, somebody else is going to. You want to be the one who, through clarity of communications and understanding their issues and being persistent, is the one that they want to work with. Another issue is details. You have to be a detail person. No one else is going to do it for you. You are chief accountant and IT person and scheduling person and on and on and on. And you have to be aware of all of those details, and you have to really make sure that everything is working properly. Again, if you don't like multitasking, maybe not the thing for you. You need to be resourceful. And resourceful means that you can creatively solve problems. If you're going to give the same answer to every one of your clients, no matter what the question is, not going to be helpful. You need to be able to think outside the box and come up with personalized solutions and personalized approaches for your clients. A couple of the people, when you responded to the survey, and I asked, what's the most important thing you want to know? Some of them said, I want to know how to monetize this and make it into a product. Yes, there are people who can do that. It's difficult to do. And you need to be a very well-established consultant before you can even think about doing that. The other piece of this is that you need to be able to anticipate problems very early on. And you need to be able to provide solutions before the problem happens. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I had a client, and I was asked to interview a very large number of very senior people around the globe. and then to help them come up with a strategy based on what we heard. And I looked at the list of people and said, there is no way they're going to respond to me. Why would they even open an email or take a phone call from me? On the other hand, they should take a phone call or respond to an email from the organization that I was hired by. And I said to them, you need to set up the interviews. I can do them, but you need to set them up because otherwise this isn't going to happen. And when they thought about it, and I gave them a script and I gave them the email to send, it was not a big issue for them and the project went really well. But it was only because I brought it up, and I brought it up at the proposal stage. And I was the only one of the people who were giving proposals who said, not going to happen unless we do this. That's the idea of thinking about things early and coming up with a solution before the problem happens. You need to be disciplined and you need to be willing to put in the time and the effort. I love this Thomas Jefferson quote, I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more I have of it. You need to work hard. You will work hard. Being a consultant, some people think is, oh, my calendar's my own, I can do what I like. That's true. But you are chief salesperson as well as chief provider of services. That's a lot of work. So, have I scared you off yet? It's a poll. If I have, that's not a bad thing, by the way. You will have saved yourself a lot of effort and energy. But hopefully I haven't scared you off. I've given you a realistic view of what it means to be a consultant. So how are we doing, Kendra?
We're just waiting for a few more people to submit their votes. And we're going to close that poll in just a few more seconds. So go ahead and get your votes in. Okay, and we're going to close that poll. And we're going to share those results.
Okay, most of you are ready to go. A couple of you are rethinking. Well, one person is rethinking this. So, okay, good. I'm glad I didn't scare you off. And I'm glad you have a realistic view of what it is to be a consultant. So now, what do you do? I will answer a few questions if anyone has one before we move on. And we're just going to wait a minute or two.
So we have a question, and I'll just say, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. And our first question comes to us from Kaidi. Has there ever been a time that you were meeting with a client and did not know the answer to something they needed? How did you navigate from not knowing and silencing your imposter syndrome?
Okay, happens all the time. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. But one of the things I do know is how to get an answer. And I will get back to a client and say, interesting question. I'm not sure I do have an answer for that, but I'll find out and get back to you. And trust me, I always get back to them. And if it takes me a half an hour to figure out what the answer is to the question, I will do that. It's time well spent.
A question from Brandon. How active do you have to be on social media to be credible?
Depends what industry you're in. For some people, more than others. Some industries, not at all. We're going to get to that a little bit later in the webinar, so let's hold off on that one.
Okay, and I know this is a question that you're not going to go into great depth today, but maybe you can advise people if there's going to be other resources on it. How do you price yourself?
Yes. Pricing is a very, very large issue. And it could take 45 minutes to an hour to go through that. And in fact, maybe we'll need to do a webinar strictly on pricing. The one thing I would suggest is if you don't already have a SCORE mentor, get a SCORE mentor and have them help you work that through. That's the best resource we've got. So we're going to keep going, but hold on to your questions. I see there's more. We're going to stop again at a few other places, but I want to get through the material, and I will stay on a little bit after the end of the webinar if there are additional questions. So let's talk about some practical considerations. There's 3 issues that we're going to talk about. The first is describing your practice in a way that makes you stand out from your competitors. And remember, you've got a lot of them. How you set up your business. And then the piece that everybody wants to know, how do you identify and attract potential clients? So let's talk about talking about your business and your consulting practice. I mentor a lot of people, and the first thing I ask everyone to do is to give me an elevator pitch. And if you don't know what an elevator pitch, was named because you're supposed to be able to describe to someone who knows nothing about you, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why you are doing what you do, and why someone would want to work with you in the space of time that it takes to go up maybe to the 30th floor in an elevator, which is to say 30 seconds to a minute. And you won't ever do that. But if you can't describe what you do clearly and precisely and concisely, you're going to have a tough time in front of clients. Clients do not want to hear a 10-minute explanation of what you do. And quite frankly, on social media and on a website, you need to have, again, that very concise, precise description of what you do. We know that people have the attention span of a flea. So you can't get it across real quickly, they're going to go somewhere else. A few tips. Think about what you've learned on the job, not your education, but on the job that has provided you with real insights and skills. Make a list of them. That's going to help you. List what you most like about your work. What are the activities or the results that give you the most satisfaction? I realized a long time ago that I love working directly with people and talking with them. And I started out in marketing research because I loved being in front of a group of people in a focus group and talking with them about things that I knew nothing about. To me, that was great. I expanded it and went into other things, but that was the beginning part of my career as a consultant. And then, I said this before, and I tell this to people a lot, record yourself describing what you do. Don't censor yourself. Just keep talking. Talk for 10 minutes if you have to. Shut off the recorder, go back the next day, record yourself for another 10 minutes. And if you don't know what to say to yourself, Karen says I have to keep talking. Karen says I have to keep talking. And just keep talking. Then go back and listen and pull out key phrases that best capture your skills. You'll be surprised there are some gems in there that really are nuggets that describe what you do. You also have to understand what sets you apart from competition. Why should a client hire you? What is it that makes you different, that makes you stand out? And one of the first things that I always advise people to do is to do an internet search of other people in your field. And don't just look in New York, look in other cities in the US, look in Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas, but also look in other countries. Go look in England or Australia. What you're going to find is that people have very different ways of talking about themselves. And you're going to learn a lot about what makes you special. How are you similar? How are you different? The other thing that I tell people to do is, if you've heard the term, steal like an artist. Don't steal and don't take exactly what people say, but use it as inspiration for how you describe yourself. Also, if you already have clients, if you're already in business, ask them what it is that they like about working with you. What is it that makes you unique? How are you different from other consultants that they work with? And if you don't have clients, go back to colleagues and ask your colleagues that. And remember that what sets you apart can include both hard and soft skills. When you set up your business, and everybody has this question, whether it's consulting or any other type of business, is what type of legal entity should I be? Should I be a sole proprietor, a partnership, an LLC, a corporation? I can't give you an answer here, but make sure that you consult with a professional before you make a decision. And again, if you have a SCORE mentor, they can help you work through what the best type of entity is for your business. There is not one size fits all. Consultants come in every one of these types of legal entities. And then we get to the one that everybody is most interested in. So how do you get a client? Well, the first thing you need to do is, how do you decide who really is your target? And it can't be the whole world. People will come in and say, it's all women. I don't think so. I have yet to see, unless you're Coca-Cola, any client, and even they are not for everyone. I don't drink this stuff. Here are some ways to figure out who your clients are. If you are currently in business, who have been your current clients? Or if you've worked in a company, who are the kinds of people that you've been working with? That's the first issue. Then think about where you can best network. I have someone who I'm mentoring who started out with, well, it's for every woman who's out there. And then we defined it. It's every working woman. Wait a minute, that's still a very large pool of people. Well, she ended up, and I won't say the ethnic group she's in, but she decided that she was going to help women in her ethnic group and her nationality who are recent immigrants to the US figure out how to get into business. And she has a thriving business now because she was able to target them with a very specific message, and she knew where to find them, and she knew how to talk to them, and she spoke their language, which is not English, as well as English. And she's a wonderful success story, and she went from all women to this very defined group. The next piece is, where can you provide the greatest value? Who are the clients who are going to get the most out of what you do? Again, I have somebody who I'm working with who's in a technical field, and he decided that he was going to not work within IT departments. He was going to work with smaller companies who didn't have IT departments because he was very good at explaining things, and he could help them when they needed to get new hardware and help them move everything over. In any event, it took a while for him to figure that out, but once he got there and knew who his clients were going to be and where to find them, he was great. And he has a successful business, and it's been even more successful during the pandemic because he helps them do everything and they never have to get off their computer. They can do it on Zoom. He orders things for them, has them delivered, and he can set it up for them remotely. What could be better? Is there a market niche that's underserved? And in fact, there are. And I go back to the woman who I was just talking about, who in her nationality, nobody was working with women and helping them to understand what the American system was like to get jobs. They came from a country where you got a job because you knew someone, and that was the only way to get a job. And she taught them there are other ways to do it. And after you've answered all those questions, you also have to ask yourself, do they have the ability to pay for your services? Because if they don't, you are doing great work and you are being a good person, but you do not have a business. I had someone who went through this whole thing, and she was going to work in underserved communities and had this great plan, and it was wonderful, except that the people who she wanted to work with were never going to be able to pay her. So we talked about it a lot and finally decided that the people who could pay her were foundations. And so instead of going directly to the people who needed her services, she started pitching foundations and putting in grant proposals. And that's how she got money to do the work she wanted to do. Remember I said before, you need to be creative? Well, this is an area where sometimes it helps to be creative. But these are really critical questions to ask yourself, And the first thing that you say is probably not the right answer. Think about it, put it away, think about it again. Once you've figured out who your target is, and we're going to talk about each of these in depth, there are many ways that you can attract clients. You can use your network, you can, or develop a network. You can promote yourself on social media, which works for a lot of people depending upon what kind of social media. A website, writing articles, giving talks, partnerships, reviews, and most important, research potential clients and then contact them in innovative ways. Emails are typically not effective. I have spoken with more people who say, oh, I've sent out all these email blasts and I'm getting nothing. That shouldn't be a surprise. They don't know who you are. You're either going into spam or they're getting 500 emails a day. Why are they going to open it? You go immediately into trash. One of the things that I often suggest to people is get a smaller list, send out letters, snail mail. Although I have to say, as people are working from home now, that may not work either. But when people are back in their offices, that actually is a great way to contact them. When I first started my business, I sent out a slew of letters to potential clients, and I sent them FedEx and said it was an investment, because you know that everybody was going to open a FedEx envelope, and people were impressed that I had sent it to them and were willing to talk to me. So think about ways other than email that you can get in touch with people, because that's probably not going to help. So let's talk about your network. First of all, make a list of absolutely everyone who might be able to hire you or put you in touch with others who might, and then contact them. Make sure that your pitch is perfect. And I go back to role playing. Role play if you can. It is really important. Think about things that people might ask you. Think about things you should be asking them. If you're going to listen to them first, you need to understand their situation. Think about things that you want to ask them. And here's a tip. Once you've made a list of everyone who you want to contact, start with the least likely ones first so you can practice your pitch. You don't want to go to the 3 people you really want to work with first, because you're likely not to be perfect when you're talking with them. And those are not people who you want to not have a great impression. So start with the ones that you don't care about and move your way up the list. And then follow up with everyone. Calling someone once and having a conversation is very nice. That will not get you a project. The reality is that you are building a relationship. That's how you get business. And the only way that you build a relationship is to follow up with everyone that you speak with. But you don't want to follow up and just say, hi, how are you? Gee, it's been a while since we've spoken. That's useless and annoying and wastes their time. What you want is to have some real significant content that you can share with them. If you read an article, or you hear a podcast, or you see a video that you think is interesting and applies to them in some way, that's when you send them an email with a great subject line that says, I thought this podcast would be really interesting to you. They will open it. And then make sure that you add your point of view into that email. You want to be able to show that you not just are passing along information, but that you have a point of view about it. I thought this was really interesting because, or I thought this applied to your situation because, is a great way to do it. Somebody asked the question early on about social media, and social media these days is critical. More people are on it. This is where people find people. And it is for almost everyone something that you need to do, whether you like it or not. And there are a lot of people who hate social media. The only thing I can say to you is get over it. You're going to have to use it. You need to be careful in what you do. You don't need to be on every single platform. You need to understand where your prospects are active. For some people, Instagram is perfect. And I had somebody who's in the fashion business. That was where she needed to be. But for most people in business, it's going to be LinkedIn. And for some people, if you're doing business to consumer, it's going to be Facebook. And one of the things that I suggest if you're using LinkedIn or Facebook is to look for active groups of people who could be potential clients. And what I mean by an active group is it's a large enough group, it has at least a couple hundred members, and people are posting on it and responding to things that have been posted. If there's 20,000 members and nobody's active on it, it's a useless group to you. Conversely, if it's a very small group, even if they're very active, it's probably not going to be a huge help. It's worth spending the time finding those groups. Once you find a group, the first thing you want to do is just ghost it for a while and see what's going on. Then start responding to postings with a point of view. Not, gee, that's great, but I thought that was interesting because. And then, after you've done that for a while, start creating your own brief, provocative postings. People will respond. If somebody responds to your postings, message them on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and start having a conversation with them and try to have a phone call or Zoom session with them. You'd be amazed how often that happens and how successfully you can do that. I'm working with someone now who managed to get every one of her clients through LinkedIn contacts. She was relentless using it, and it really paid off. You're going to need to have a website. And I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to hear from most people, which is don't sweat it too much. For consultants, it's a verification tool, not a sales tool. But it does need to accurately reflect your areas of expertise and, most importantly, the benefits that you bring to clients. It needs to answer the question, what's in it for me? Commonly referred to as WIFM. And the reason that's so important, and it needs to be absolutely front and center, is that if they can't figure out why they should work with you, immediately they will move on. Oh, and by the way, the same applies to your LinkedIn profile and your Facebook profile. Make sure that it is absolutely spot on in terms of both your expertise and your benefits. I've read more LinkedIn profiles that talk about how great I am and never say a word about their clients and why their clients like working with them and what their clients get out of working with them. You need to make sure that's in your profile. Sorry. A longer-term strategy is to write articles or a book. And it is a longer-term strategy, but it can really pay off. The direct financial impact is not going to be big no matter what you do. But if you get published, it leads to, or can lead to, a lot of visibility and lead generation. People will start contacting you because they're interested. It is a great reason to contact absolutely everyone on your network. Gee, I just had this article published, thought you'd be interested, would love to talk with you about it. It gives you enhanced credentials, and it can lead to speaking engagements that we're going to talk about in a minute, which are a great way to get clients, whether you're business to business or business to consumer. If you're going to give talks, and at these days it's primarily webinars and podcasts, this slide was written pre-pandemic. understand where your prospects are likely to be. And again, if you have a very clear definition of your target, this won't be that difficult. And I'll give you some possibilities. And it goes way past this. Libraries, colleges, professional conferences, podcasts. Someone I am mentoring who is a tutor started giving talks in libraries, and that's where she's gotten a lot of her clients. Think about what your topic is. It cannot be a sales talk. If it's a sales talk, you will turn people off. And given that everything now is online, trust me, people will just click off your webinar if it's a sales talk. It's just, they will go away. I'm going to go back to with them. What's in it for me? You have to provide some real content. But, and here's a really big exception, you don't want to give away so much that they have no reason to talk to you. And I've seen that happen too. I looked at the deck for someone who was I was mentoring, and she had given so much information that when I asked her, so why would I contact you if you just told me what to do? And the answer was, I guess you wouldn't. So she revised it so that there was some content, but left a lot of unanswered questions. And that's the balance that you want to strike. And here's the thing that you'd think would be obvious, and I've seen presentation decks that don't have it. Make sure you provide your contact information and repeat it several times so people can get back to you. Many people look to build partnerships as a way of increasing their reach and expanding the capabilities. I have somebody who is a graphic designer, and she is now working with a writer who's a marketing person, and together they are doing very well because they've expanded both their capabilities and they each had client bases that they pulled together. But finding that right partner is crucial. You can't just partner with anyone. My best friend, who I love dearly, is not the person to be my partner, unless, and here's the unless, there is an alignment of core values. If you don't have the same long-term purpose, this is never going to work. And you're going to end up in a failed partnership with a lot of problems. Make sure you have complementary strengths. If you're both great with working with people and both of you hate detail work, I can already tell you there are going to be arguments and fights about, you didn't build them, I thought you built them. You didn't do that, I thought you did that. You need to be very clear that you have the skill sets and that both of you are willing to do what's needed and not assume that the other person is going to do it. There needs to be clear and frequent communication. Talk once a week, no matter what, at a minimum. I did not have partnerships, but I did work on a massive 5-year project with 2 other consultants. And we made it a point to talk every single week for half an hour. It was on our calendars, and no matter what we spoke, I strongly suggest you do that. And again, very clear assignment of responsibilities, who's doing what, and make sure you have a legal agreement. A handshake and a smile and a, gee, it'll be great if we work together, is not enough. If your business really takes off, and I've heard about this, suddenly there are disagreements, there is no legal agreement, and there are massive legal problems. So if you do it early on, you will have saved yourself a great deal of aggravation later. Some consultants, especially those who work business to consumer, effectively use endorsements and reviews to bring in clients. I have somebody who is a coach who has gotten a ton of Yelp reviews, and she's gotten a lot of clients that way. It has always surprised me, but she swears that's the truth. it may take some effort to get clients to post reviews. What I typically suggest to people is send them a link for exactly where you want them to post the review, and send them a short, don't send them what they should write, but say, it would be helpful if your review included what it was like to work with me, anything along those lines. And for those of you who use LinkedIn extensively, make sure you get endorsements and that you have people writing reviews for you. It's important. Okay, we're going to stop and answer. I saw that we had a lot of questions. We're only going to answer a few, but again, I will stay on at the end.
Thanks, Karen. So you spoke a lot about clients and relationships. How do you get clients when you do not have strong relationships? What would be the best way to approach that?
Well, again, depending upon what your business is, and it's a little difficult to do this without knowing what it is, LinkedIn is a great way if you're business to business, and I strongly suggest that. I also said, you may not have a network now, but you know people in your life. Start asking people. You'd be surprised who might know someone who might know someone. And that's how you start building the network. You may have to start from the ground up, but you can do it. Again, if you're running out of ideas, go to a SCORE mentor. They'll help you think it through. There are many, many, many ways to start to build a network. It is difficult, but it is, I've never heard of a case where it's not doable.
Thanks. Here's a question from Thalia. What's the most effective way for a consultant to bounce back from COVID-19, especially in sales?
All the same things as when you're first starting up. I hate to say it, but that's the reality. A lot of people, are having a tough time now. But there's also a number of people who are being very successful, and they have been networking all through the pandemic. And the thing that I say to them is, don't talk about what's happening now. Start talking to them about what happens when things open up. Be very forward thinking. Don't talk about now, talk about next steps. Talk with your clients about how their business is going to grow and how they're going to come back and what you might be able to do to help them come back. That's the best thing I can suggest, is to be as forward thinking as you can, and do not stop networking and contacting people no matter what. And again, all the things that I said, if you see an article, you listen to a podcast, you see a video, send it along with, I thought this might apply to your business, let's have a conversation. Best thing I can suggest to you.
Last question for this round of Q&A. Can you talk about the importance of having a lawyer when you start out as a consultant?
It's important to have someone, depends what your business is. You may need a lot of legal agreements. I'm going to be giving an advanced class webinar in September. And that's one of the issues that I'm going to talk about, is what all the legal agreements are that you need. Because you'll need, particularly if you have subcontractors, you're going to need non-disclosure agreements. You're going to need contracts with them. There's a lot of things that you may need help with. If you can afford a lawyer, that's great. If you can't, there's a lot of that stuff that's available free on the web. The New York Bar Association, pre-pandemic, had something called Free Monday Night Law, and you could go schedule an appointment and spend half an hour with an attorney, and they would answer your questions, read documents if necessary. I know that there's some other resources out there. I don't have them in front of me, I'm sorry. But there are other resources where you can get free legal assistance. They'll answer some questions for you. If you're really just starting out, it's not that big a deal, but do talk with someone about the structure of your business. That will be important.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to take one more sip here. Okay. So here's some nuts and bolts. You've gotten some clients, so now what do? Now's the fun part. We're going to talk about writing proposals and some tips on time management and some final tips on what you do to help you succeed and stay sane. Writing proposals is a big one. Not so much for business to consumer, but there's a lot of you who are business to business, and this is going to be crucial because even if you had a great relationship with a client and you've built a really good relationship, you don't write a good proposal, you will not get a project. So here's what you do. First thing you do, before you start to write anything, if you've gotten a request for proposal, an RFP, read it very, very carefully. If you've gotten a phone call or a Zoom with a client, listen to what they're saying, and in both cases, ask a lot of questions. Asking questions does not make you look like you don't know what you're doing. It makes you look like you do know what you're doing because you're clarifying things. Ask as many questions as you need to. Don't think there's a number limit. There have been times when I've spent half an hour with a list of questions and just, so what did you mean by this? And could I do that? And would this be important to you? And if you had to prioritize, because it's going to be very expensive if we do all of these things, what are the top 2 things you really need to have come out of this? Ask whatever you need. Get the context. Sometimes people will say, I need you to do such and such. And my question is, why? How does that fit into your bigger business goals? Try to understand what your piece of the puzzle is in the larger world in which your client lives. It will help you to write a better design and write a better proposal and really get your client what they need. They know what their situation is. Often they don't even think to tell you what the situation is, but if you understand it, you're going to do a much better job. Define any key terms. Sometimes you think something's obvious, it isn't necessarily, and you could have 2 varied definitions of something. Again, if you say, phrase it in the way of, in my world, saying such and such means this. I just want to confirm that that's what you mean. That shows your expertise. It doesn't make you look any less competent, and it clarifies it and makes sure that you're both talking about the same thing. If you can, learn who the decision makers are. Very often you will get a request from somebody who's, you should pardon the expression, down the food chain, and they're not the one who have the issue. Find out who it is because that's who you're writing the proposal for. And I've had that happen in my own career many, many times where I'm talking to somebody who's fairly junior. And if I start asking and I find out that it's a very senior person, I'm giving them a very different proposal. Very early on, determine if there are specific data formatting or any other requirements. If you are working with the government or with any kind of very, very large institution, this is crucial. They will look at it, and if it does not follow their protocol for formatting, they will toss it out unread. Happens all the time. So absolutely make sure you're doing that. And then if you can, and you can't always do this, try to determine the budget and the time frame. You don't want a proposal that's for $100,000 when they're thinking $10,000. You don't want to write a proposal that's 6 months when they need it in 3 weeks. You need to tailor your proposal to what their needs are. So that's a very important part of this. Make sure that you are specific, that there are no generalities at all in what you're writing. If you need to, ask someone else to read it. They don't even need to be in your business. Because if there's jargon in there that they don't understand, you need to get rid of it. If they say, I don't understand exactly what this means, make sure that you enhance it. Make sure that you state the problem and the objectives. Start off with that so that everybody's clear what it is that you are doing. Propose your approach and how it will address the objectives and benefit the client. Again, what's in it for me? Make sure that that's crystal clear. Include the specific steps, including the project parameters, what the deliverables will be, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. The schedule, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The budget, and your credentials and experience specifically as they relate to this project and why your knowledge is going to make you a good consultant for this issue. Before you send the proposal, proofread it carefully. There is nothing worse than getting something that's riddled with typos. Well, actually, there is. The worst thing you can possibly do is misspell your client's name. I got to tell you, that's a bad one, and I've seen it. One of the things that I've done for some of my clients is read proposals, and I got to tell you, I've seen them where they've misspelled the client's name. That's a real no-no. Go back and reread the request for proposal and make sure that every issue that has been raised has been addressed. Confirm that you have demonstrated your knowledge and how it's going to benefit the client. When you've done all that, proofread it again. Some tips. Make sure that you write with your reviewers in mind. Before I said you might get a proposal from somebody who's relatively junior and it's going up to more senior people. Write with them in mind, not the junior person. Be concise and clear. Focus on what is essential. Having a 25-page proposal that really should only be 10, but focused, 10 is better than 25. Length is not quality, it's just quantity. Be explicit about the relevance of your experience. I just spoke to that. Anticipate the questions and try to answer them. Before, I said very early on that anticipating problems and providing some potential solutions at the beginning is a great way to differentiate yourself from other consultants. Include procedure for feedback and revisions. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But what you want to do is make sure that you don't go off and do something for 10 weeks, never have a conversation, and then you come back with a final product and it's not what they want. When you include a timeline, detail as many interim steps as you can. And here's an interesting point. Somebody said to me, yeah, but if I do that, I'm giving away everything I do, and they can take it and do it themselves. And that's exactly correct. You do not want to do that. You want to do enough steps to show what the process will be, but you're not giving them a roadmap so that they can do it or they can hand it over to another consultant to do it. You also, and this is really crucial, need to specify what you need from the client and even more importantly, when you need it. If you are doing website design, you need to say when you need the content from them, when you need the graphics from them, what that graphics needs to look like, what the specifications are for the photographs. And you need to give them a timeline as to when you need it. Because if they don't provide it when you need it, you can be sitting around twiddling your thumbs. That's time that you're not getting paid for because they haven't delivered it when they need to. I typically, when I write a proposal, put in all of those deliverables from the client and say that if they don't deliver it when they say they're going to, that there may be an additional charge. Make sure you do specific check-in times and intermediate reviews and when the deliverables are due. Make sure you have your budget in there, which includes your base price and any additional costs. I used to do a lot of travel, so there were travel costs. Sometimes there are literally messengers for physical things that need to go back and forth. What the payment terms are, and a provision for changes to methods or deliverables. Crucial. If they say change it, that's great. Happy to do that, but you need to pay for it. The golden rule is always have a written signed contract before starting a job. And I cannot emphasize that enough. We still have a little bit of time, so I'm going to very quickly tell a story. I had a client, big client. I was in the maybe 3/4 of the way through a huge project. Client fired every single person in the marketing department. Now what do? Well, I didn't even know who to talk to. I finally found the right person, and they said, we don't know who you are, we don't know what you're doing, and we're not paying you. I had to get an attorney, but I had a signed contract, and I got paid for the full project. Had I not had that signed contract, I would have lost a fortune. Okay, questions?
Great, thank you, Karen. So we have a number of different questions. What systems can we use with consulting? There are systems like Trainual. Do you know about Trainual?
I don't. There are a zillion tools out there. It's something that I'm intending to include in the advanced webinar. It's too much to go into here, but there are a lot of them and well worth looking at because they're very helpful to help you be very clear and concise and organized. And yes, I strongly encourage you to use them.
Thank you. Ash asks, is there a difference between B2B and B2C networking, prospecting, and marketing? So how you would network marketing?
Yeah. The basic principles are the same. The tools you use are different. I've been talking a lot about business to business, but business to consumer, again, you want to network and you want to get out there and you want to create an image for yourself. You want to ask friends and friends of friends, go back to your college alumni association, go talk with alumni. There are lots of ways to do it. It's just different, slightly different approaches, but the basic concepts are identical, not at all different.
Staying in that area, Sarah asks, if I'm targeting people who are not yet in business but have decided to start a business, is my consulting business a B2B or a B2C?
It's B2B. As long as you're talking about business issues as opposed to personal issues, I would say it's a business to business. But to be honest with you, it doesn't make any difference. You can think of yourself that way, but what you're trying to do is, you will have a lot of competition. I'm mentoring 3 people who are doing exactly that, which is not to put you off because there's a lot of people looking to open businesses, particularly at the moment. And the way that they network is both on LinkedIn and Facebook, and some of them are on Instagram, some of them are on Twitter. They're building up a base through that, but it helps you to understand, to have a niche within that realm, like the person I was talking about who decided that she was going to go with people of her same nationality. And you need to think about it and narrow it down to some manageable group of people as opposed to the whole world who's starting businesses.
Thanks. And then one last question before we move on. Would you recommend offering your services for free to a target client to establish your credibility in the field?
No. What I would suggest doing is, if you have friends, work with friends so you get some experience and so they can write reviews of you. Do not think of it as a real project. Think of it as gaining experience. You are in business. You want to charge for your services. You do not want to get someone who you don't know and have never worked with and give away your work for free. It's a very bad precedent.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay, time management, and I'm trying to do it because we're going to run out of time. So first of all, make sure that your activities support your business goals. That is very important. Doing things that are fun to do, but they are not going to get you where you need to get to, are not a help. Find your work style and stick with it. And what I mean by that, for example, is I find that I can't work on something for 6 hours straight. It is a virtual impossibility for me. And I typically have multiple projects. I work on one for an hour, switch to another project, get up, take a walk, take my dog out, do something else, come back. And what I find is that my subconscious has been working on it. And when I go back to the first project, great, I can move along. Not everyone works that way. Find what you work, the best way for you. As a consultant, you can work at midnight if that works for you, but do what works for you and stay with it. Make sure you set priorities. Make a list of everything that needs to get done. Don't start at the bottom of the list, start at the top. Do the things that are critical first, then move on. I've seen people say, I want to get everything off the list, so I'm going to do the easy ones. That's great, but you haven't done the ones that really have to happen. Try to eliminate distractions. I know in the COVID world, that is not always easy. You're working at home. You've got kids, you've got, all kinds of distractions. Do whatever you can. If you have to sit in the bedroom away from everyone else, close the door, do it. It's very easy to get absorbed when you get a project, but you have to carve out time to keep marketing. Remember that cliff I talked about before? Not a good place to be. Make sure you schedule time for yourself. One of the tricks that I've done pretty much since I've been a consultant is to block off typically a half day on my calendar every single week that says no meetings. And so then I can honestly say to clients, sorry, I can't meet with you then. There's something on my calendar. The fact that it's a don't schedule anything, they don't have to know that. Use that time for marketing, for catching up on things that have gotten away from you, or just relaxing. It is a great way to make sure that you stay on track. A few final tips, and I love this cartoon. I take it up with management, but that's just me, so ignore it. You're where the buck stops, so make sure that you are taking care of these. First thing, establish what's possible. Clients can and often demand the world. You can deliver 2 of the following 3. You cannot deliver all 3. Quality, speed, and a low price. And if you think about it, you'll understand what I'm saying. You have to make this clear from your initial discussions. Don't try and do all 3. It's going to be a disaster. I tell everyone that they should underpromise and overdeliver. When I write proposals and when I communicate with clients, I typically promise 90% of what I think actually is achievable. And then I try and deliver 110%. You look like a hero. And if you were aiming for 100%, but you didn't tell them that, and you don't get there, nobody's upset. This is a really good rule to follow. Define your process. Make sure that you create a detailed plan for all of your projects. If you don't know what a Gantt chart is, that's G-A-N-T-T, go look it up. It is a great tool to use for planning. And even if your client says, I don't care how you do it, just get it done. Make sure that you have a detailed plan. They will be happier, you will be happier, and it gives everybody a roadmap of what's going to happen and when. Remember I said at the very beginning, communicate, over-communicate. You need to do this. Make sure your client knows and agrees to their responsibilities. Again, I said this before. When I write a timeline, I make sure that it's there so that I know when they have to give me approvals, when they have to deliver information, photographs, whatever it is. Make sure that they have agreed to that and have signed it in the contract. Define your deliverables. You and your client must agree on what it is that the final product is, as well as interim steps. Details count. I said that at the beginning, and I'm not kidding. No one wants surprises. You don't want to find out that they were expecting a PowerPoint presentation and 3 verbal presentations to different groups of people in their company, and you thought you were going to produce a Word document. That would be horrible. You don't want to do that. Make sure it can be endless what that final product is. And one of the things, and I've said this to somebody who designs websites that I mentor, make sure you tell them that they are allowed, once you've gotten to the final website, 2 changes, and after that, that is the final product, and anything after that costs money. Again, don't want any surprises, and you don't want to get them upset. Which leads me to the infamous scope creep. I hope you've heard about this, because as a consultant, you are going to have to deal with it. I have never seen a consultant who doesn't. You think you've clearly outlined the project process and the deliverables, and then the client demands more. And sometimes they change because upper management has changed. Sometimes the client changes. They leave, somebody else comes in, they want something different. You do not want to disappoint them, but what they're asking for is going to require more time and additional resources. If it's a little bit of time, you do it because you want to make your client happy. But if it really requires substantial time or resources, they need to pay for it. Make sure that you have clearly defined what you're responsible for in writing. Writing, nothing verbal. Verbal's a disaster here. And by the way, you can do that as an email if they respond in the affirmative. It does not have to be a written document beyond an email. Save the email, however. Notify the client that the requested work will cause additional money, and specify the amount, and that you need to have that written approval. Really important. This is a very simple Gantt chart on here. Communicate clearly and regularly. Remember I said you needed to have a plan for your project? Communicate using plain English if the client may not be familiar with or understand anything technical or slang. Don't depend only on words. Send examples, visuals. Particularly if you're in a visual business, send them visuals. Even if it's not requested, send regular progress updates. I used to send a weekly update. Clients never asked for it. They loved it. One of the reasons they liked working with me. Over-communicate both the good news and the bad. I've said this a number of times. One of the things that I've learned in my profession is I repeat things. And the reason I repeat them is by the time I've said it the 3rd time, everybody gets it. So over-communicate. Talk with your clients as soon as possible when you learn anything especially important. And that can be good news as well as bad. If I learned something interesting, when I talked about, interviewing people all around the globe, I heard some amazing things. And I immediately transmitted it to the client. They loved it. But if you need to do this specifically if you have any problems, and you absolutely need to do it if the timeline is going to be delayed. Over-communicate both good news and bad. And if it's the bad news, make sure you have a plan of action to offer. Things happen. Things go wrong. If something messes up, make it right. Don't pretend it doesn't exist and ignore it. Ignoring the problem will not make it go away, and you absolutely need to give them some options. Reminder, always have a written signed contract before you start anything. So that's the presentation. There's a lot to think about. Being a successful consultant requires a lot of different skills and a lot of hard work. The good news is that there are many success stories, and you can get free mentoring to help you succeed.
Yes, thank you, Karen. So we highly encourage you, if you still have questions, even if you don't have questions, to get a SCORE mentor, because they provide that one-on-one guidance targeted to your specific business, targeted to your specific needs as a consultant. So, get a SCORE mentor. It's free. If try it, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but try it. It's a great resource now during COVID, and it's a great resource on an ongoing basis. Again, the service is free, and it's at newyorkcity.score.org. And let me show you what the website looks like. This is what it looks like. I've highlighted a couple resources. The first is the coronavirus financial resources. A lot of people are finding this very helpful. We have compiled all the resources. We update this regularly, frequently. So if you want to know what the latest coronavirus financial resources are and you want it summarized in one place, you can check it out here. And then below that is request a video mentor. Due to COVID, all of our mentoring right now is being done via video or phone, primarily via video. So they are 1-hour sessions. And you would just request a mentor via that button. And again, it's newyorkcity.score.org. So following this presentation, we're going to send, or following this presentation, we're going to send to the email that you registered with a copy of this presentation, so the slides, as well as a recording of this webinar. And then we've already sent you a webinar survey. And that is very valuable to us because it lets us know what worked about this webinar, what you found valuable, what you're taking away, and what could have been improved, what you would like to see, what we could do better. So please take a moment to fill out that webinar survey. What's also really valuable about it is you can give suggestions for future webinar topics. I noticed in your Q&A, a number of you mentioned things like selling, or marketing. And so if you have specific ideas for future webinar topics that would be useful to you, go ahead, fill out that webinar survey and let us know specifically what would meet your needs. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up to Q&A. And we have a lot of specific questions as well as general questions. So
Just interrupt for 1 second. We're supposed to end at 11:30. I am going to stay on, so you can leave, but feel free to stay on. I'll stay on for until I answer a good number of the questions. So,
thank you, Karen. So I'm going to take as many general questions as I can, and then we're going to start going down to the more specific questions and take as many of those as we can. But we're going to start with the general ones because I think they're of benefit to the most people. Ifanaya asks, how can you begin to market yourself with a somewhat new business model that your customers are just beginning to think about?
Ooh, that's actually a tough question. And the reason that it's a tough question is because I don't know enough about what your business model is. So it's a general question that, remember I said I ask a lot of questions, and if we were sitting face to face, I would be asking you many, many, many questions about that because I'm not quite understanding, to be really honest with you. I'm going to suggest that you talk with a SCORE mentor, or put in a request and I'll try and talk with you. I don't have an answer for that one.
Thank you. We have a question from Margarita. You'd mentioned checking for companies in other countries, and she asks, how do you check companies in other countries for this service you provide?
Oh, just put in whatever the consulting practice is, Australia, and all the Australian companies will come up. Or marketing researchers, Great Britain, they'll all show up. So just put in the name of the country in your search bar.
From Deborah, should plan be written in the original proposal?
Depends what the issue is. When I did the one that I was talking about earlier about these, all of these interviews around the world, I did put it in because I didn't honestly think that it would work without it. So my plan B was right up front because I honestly didn't know how it would work. However, if I think there's a possibility that something will work, I don't put it in the proposal. I don't want them to be second guessing me, but I have it in the back of my mind that I can offer it to them. And sometimes, and this happened in my industry, and it may or may not happen in, where you work, there's almost always a conversation with consultants if there's multiple bidders. And then I'll bring it up verbally, but I don't typically put it in the written proposal.
Thanks. From Christian, what other source of income can a consultant get aside from the transactional one-to-one consulting?
A lot of people try and monetize it by doing webinars and selling them, by creating a product, a consulting product, and selling it. For example, in the market research world, there are what are called omnibus surveys, where you get multiple sponsors, and so you're getting 10 different companies or 10 different organizations to sponsor it, and you're selling it to 10 of them, and that's a very financially successful way to do it. Depends on the particular industry. There are many tools that you can use, but the thing that I'm going to start out by saying is, unless you already have a successful consulting practice, it's not going to work. It is really important that you have established yourself and have a name in your industry before you try to monetize it in other ways. That probably won't be successful without a really stellar reputation.
From Rose, do you have to be in New York City to access your mentors? And in fact, you do not, because we do the mentoring via video and phone. You can be located outside of New York City. And also a question from Amanda, with SCORE, can you request a specific mentor like marketing? And yes, you can say a specific area that you want to be mentored in, and we will find a mentor with the background closest to what you're looking for, and we will match you with them. So another question from Amanda, is it good to work with a marketing researcher when starting out as a consultant in a specific field?
Market researchers do not come cheap. So unless you have a whole lot of money, I would say you don't want to work with a market researcher. But you do want to do market research. And there are a lot of ways that you can do market research. SurveyMonkey is free if you do use their basic service. And that's a great tool. You obviously have to have lists of people to send it to, but that's a good way. When the world was functioning normally, I used to send people off, depending upon what they were consulting on, to go to farmers markets and go stand at a farmers market and ask people. Go to a meeting of some kind, drop in, go to industry associations and ask people questions. That's a great tool. Secondary research, you can always do. That's what I just described was primary research, where you're directly going to people. Secondary research means going and looking at what already exists. And there is a phenomenal amount of information that you can get. Both the Brooklyn Public Library has a business area that will answer and help you research things, and I think you can access them online. And the Science Industry and Business Library has the same. The tools for doing research to find lists are endless. And I strongly suggest that you go to one of the libraries virtually and find out what you can get. There are also, just doing Google searches, you can find out a huge amount about your competitors, about what's being done. There are research reports. Go to industry associations. They have phenomenal amounts of information that you can get. Sometimes you do not need to be a member of the association. Sometimes you do. But it'll be cheaper for you to become a member in an association than it will be to hire a market researcher. So I would say do your own research first, and try and get the information that way.
Thanks. Ash asks, when one is prospecting in B2B, how many times does one follow up with a non-responsive prospect before marking the prospect as a dead lead?
If they're not responding to emails, the answer is you don't have a whole lot of options. If you've spoken to them on the phone, I would say start doing some of the things that I said before, which is make sure that you're providing content to them. If you're providing content, you have a real reason to talk with them again. Having just email contacts is not a way to get business. I honestly believe that unless you have a conversation, the likelihood that you'll ever get business from anyone is fairly slim. So your goal is to always have a phone conversation. If you've had endless emails and nothing has happened, move on. If you've had a few conversations, keep going, but make sure you provide content.
Thanks. We're getting into the more specific questions. Mark asks, is it a good idea to use Alignable to build a relationship?
I'm going to be honest and tell you I don't know what it is. Can't help you.
Okay.
But I'm going to go back to tools are great, but it's the personal contact that is going to get you clients. So unless Alignable is setting you up to have specific conversations with people, maybe they'll help you organize all of your contacts and all of your network, in which case it's great. But unless you get into personal discussions with people, that's what the goal has to be, not to make a zillion contacts that don't lead anywhere.
Linda asks, do you know of other social media platforms that would be useful for education consultants?
The people I know who've done it have actually gone through LinkedIn and have been using LinkedIn quite successfully. I don't know of any education ones specifically. I do know that if you get registered with the Department of Education, if in fact you're thinking about the schools, and then make friends with the people at the DOE, that will help you. Two of the people I'm working with are doing arts consulting in education, and they became friends in the DOE with the person who controls all of the programming and the funding for arts in the schools. You know what? That's where they got the lists of everybody they needed to contact. So again, it's networking, but you got to think about who the point person is who's going to be able to provide you with the information. And in their case, it worked out really successfully. Of course, at the moment, in the middle of the pandemic, they have had to pivot hugely, and they're doing it successfully, but it's been a real struggle because the schools are so overwhelmed and have so little money for what they do. So, but, you know, and this applies beyond education. Think about who the point person is, who has those lists or where those lists reside. It could be an association. There are many, many industry associations, and industry associations are a great way to get lists. And I'd encourage you to join an association if you think that's where your potential prospects are.
Sheila asks, what are the best sources/sites to find consultant contracts?
Well, LegalZoom works, actually. They're not bad. There's a lot of them out there. I have not gone through all of them. I do know a lot of the people who I've been working with have taken LegalZoom contracts and modified them slightly for their particular situation and then run them by a lawyer. It was not an expensive thing to do and seems to have worked quite well. So you might consider that. But I am not an attorney, and so I'm not giving you saying that that is absolutely the way to do it, but it's a good starting point.
Asks, is there any risk with focusing on a niche market too much? I need to accept any related business now. So how do you balance that with focusing only on a niche?
Try to get things that are close to your niche, kind of adjacent to it, as opposed to going far afield. But sometimes you know, when you're first starting out and somebody's offering you work, you take it. You take it for the experience, you take it for the money, you take it so you can get recommendations. When I first went out on my own, and I had been a consultant, I'd been a partner in a practice for 6 years, but I had a non-compete for a year. So for that year, I was taking all kinds of crazy projects because I needed to support myself. But I was cultivating the niche that I wanted, which, by the way, if you're interested, was finance and technology and fintech. And then on the other hand, performing arts world and not-for-profits. So I did a mix of things, but I was pretty clear that I needed to take whatever I could take. So at the very beginning, yeah, you're going to take all kinds of strange things, but try to network as much as you can within the niche that you want to be in.
Says, 4 of us would like to start a consulting firm. What are some things we should consider regarding splitting fees?
That is way too complex a question for this. First of all, I'm going to say, before we do anything else, make sure that you really have compatible skills and not overlapping. Make sure that you have your core values aligned. Make sure you have a partnership agreement before you do anything else. And if you don't have that, stop and do it. That comes way before you do fees, although fees will be part of your agreement. And I think, one of the things you need to think about is, how are you assigning responsibilities? What value are those responsibilities to the partnership? If everybody wants to be back office and nobody wants to be sales, you've got a real problem. Or conversely, everybody wants to do sales and nobody wants to be back office, you've got issues. You need to understand what the value is. And if you're each bringing in clients that you previously had, there may be a different arrangement for clients that you have cultivated prior to the partnership, rather than ones that you cultivate jointly once you're in the partnership. So it's a very complex question. Again, I strongly suggest go get a SCORE mentor and talk it through. This is not an easy answer.
Okay, TW asks, you said, quote, have friends write reviews about you, but don't give free services. So would your friends pay a discounted rate if you're just starting out?
If you've given them what I was saying was, you don't want to give free services to anybody who you don't know. If you are legitimately giving them the service, and I do mean legitimately, if you're a coach and you're coaching them, if you have designed a website for them, if you have done IT work for them, but legitimately done the work as you would do a project, you don't have to charge them, and it's okay for them to write a review because you have done exactly what you would do for a paying client. What you do not want to do is get a client who comes to you through networking, through your marketing efforts, and give them the service for free. It's a really bad precedent. I don't know how to repeat that. I hope I'm being clear.
I think this is outside your wheelhouse, but we'll give it a go. Karen asks, when building a website using do you use online software or seek the help of a professional?
Way out of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
I am not a tech person. Sorry.
Okay, here's another one that's a little wild. From Mateo, what is your experience with restaurant consulting?
Interestingly enough, I have mentored 2 people who did restaurant consulting, so I do know something. How do you like that? One of them was very interesting in that she had owned several restaurants, successful restaurants, and she decided she didn't want to do the day-to-day, that it was getting to be exhausting. She didn't want to retire exactly. And she came in as a consultant to help struggling restaurants, which if these days, I suspect she could be in very high demand. I'm not working with her anymore because she took off and actually left the New York area. She made it into a real business. What she was very clear on is what she could do and restaurants always have very low profit margins. They are just getting by for the most part. So to hire a consultant, you have to be crystal clear about what the benefit is for the bottom line. And if you can't prove it, you will not have a consultancy. You'll never get anyone to work with you. But if you can prove it, and she had the experience to prove that by changing menus, by changing what went on in the kitchen, by changing how they trained their front of house staff, that they could improve their bottom line. And she had a lot of friends in the restaurant world, did what I just described, which is she did it for a few people that she knew very well, got them to write rave reviews and talk about the impact on the bottom line. She used that to get other clients, paying clients. So it's doable, but if you cannot absolutely prove that you can impact the bottom line, particularly during this period when so many restaurants are likely to go out of business, nobody's going to have the money to pay you.
From Rose, are there any specific tips on networking that you can provide in the new world of virtual networking?
No, I wish I did. I wish I did. I can't. It is a tough place to be. The best networking you can do is through social media, which is virtual networking. A lot of the other ways are becoming more difficult, although I will say that a great way to get people to notice you, I've had a couple of people who are in the first year of their consulting practice and were doing quite well prior to COVID. And they managed to contact a slew of places and said, we'd love to be a panelist or a speaker when you have a virtual conference. And they got several places to agree. They're going to be panelists on, I think, 3 different meetings, and they're going to be a speaker at another one. And they've already been, one of those 3 they already did. And they got a slew of people who were there to connect with them. And now they're following up with them and trying to create a relationship with them. So you might want to think about that. If you have some kind of special expertise and can talk about it, see if you can get onto a panel somewhere. It's getting in front of people is always a good thing to do. So I would suggest that.
Jennifer asks, I'd like to do workshops and programs with schools. Is it best to reach out to individual schools initially or by district?
At the moment, you're going to have a tough time either place. I'm going to be really honest with you. I mentor several people who do things within the schools, and everybody's having a tough time, largely because they are trying to figure out what they're doing for the next term. And that is where all of their energy and time is being consumed. It is a very tough place to be at the moment. Prior to COVID, almost everybody that I was working with, and I've worked with a lot of people in education, was going directly to schools because they have the budget and they get to allocate it. It's helpful to have someone who's higher up, who's a district or somewhere in a different level, encourage them or promote you and say that they think that your curriculum is terrific and that it's going to benefit the kids. But they don't actually control the budget. It's the schools that control the budgets. But I'm going to say, start thinking not about for the fall semester, but for the spring semester, because it is, I think it's already too late for this semester, and I don't think you're going to get anyone's attention. I'm sorry to say that to you, but that's a realistic answer.
We're just going to take a couple more and then close it out, but we just have a couple more, so this is perfect timing. Brandon has a very specific question. Brandon does real estate and asks if you could give him one pointer, what would it be?
Sorry, I'm thinking here because there's a lot of things I could say. Networking is always critical. Having a message that is absolutely targeted, that's going to make sense. I don't even know if it's commercial real estate or residential, but know who your target is. Be very, very clear about it, and be very clear about what your benefit is to them. It's not any different than for anything else. If you can't communicate why you are different than all of the other real estate people who are out there, the likelihood is you're not going to be successful. It is important that you come up with a specific niche, because you can't be all things to all people. And most importantly, make sure that you are talking to people and understand what their needs are in this environment, because this is a very different environment for real estate than it was prior to COVID. There's a lot of activity. This is probably a great time to be a consultant in that area. But again, all of the things I said are absolutely relevant to your industry. And, you know, the marketing part is going to be really important, and the clarity of your message is going to be crucial.
Okay, if you have, Linda asks, if you have letters of commendation from former supervisors who have passed, how can you use quotes from their letter? Is that legal? Do you know?
Not a lawyer, but as far as I know, yes, it is possible, and I think you can do that. But I'm not a lawyer. I say this always. I'm not giving you legal advice, but I think ethically it's fine. If you have it and it's real, I don't see a problem.
Sarah, how do you present your experience on LinkedIn when, as a consultant, you've done a variety of projects, but for a short period of time, and that perhaps don't all fit in one category?
That's when you need to come up with a really, really good LinkedIn profile for yourself. And you need to think about how they all fit together. And trust me, there are ways of making things fit together if you really think about it. I'm going to go back. I'm going to sound like a parrot here, but get yourself a mentor and talk about it. Communication is really important. There are ways of doing it. There are ways of making them link together. Think about what the skills are that you use in all of those assignments, and where are the things that are parallel in each of the assignments, even if they were in completely different industries and doing totally different questions. And I'll give you an example from my own career, and this will make you laugh. What I didn't say at the very beginning is I have a very strange background. I have a BFA and an MFA in ceramics. I do not have an MBA, and you'd think that my background would be absolutely useless and I would never mention it to anyone. The fact is that I bring it up all the time. And what I say to people is, I have this education that's unusual, but what it taught me was to think out of the box and to be unbelievably creative. And I will give you answers and approaches that you are not going to hear from people who had MBAs. And you know what? That's not a turnoff. It makes people interested. And so think about the skills. Think about what it is that you bring. Another example, and again, goes back to my ceramics background. I'll say to people, one of the best things I learned in ceramics is there's a process. You have to do A, then B, then C, then D. You better wedge the clay, and you better, form the thing and correctly, and you better let it dry correctly, and on and on and on. There's a lot of steps. And if you don't, the thing will quite literally blow up in the kiln. So in my soul, I know there's a process, but I also know that the creativity within that process is endless. And I talk to people about that, and I explain to them why we have to do things in a particular sequence, and that I am incredibly organized and will make sure we do things correctly. And you know what? People respond really well to that. So think about the skill sets, not what you did, but what you brought to it. And that may be the thing that brings the various projects together.
Okay, the rest of our questions are very specific. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to get a SCORE mentor, to talk with a SCORE mentor. And to do that again, you'll go to the SCORE website and click on that request a video mentor button. And then there's a field where it says, you know, describe your business needs or your business questions. And the more specific you can be there, the better we're going to be able to match you with a mentor who's a good fit for you. So tell us what sort of business you have. Describe your business needs. Tell us what you're looking for. And the more specific, again, that you can be, the better we're going to be able to match you with a mentor who is a good fit. So I'm just going to say that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's webinar. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us. We hope that you found it very helpful and of a real benefit. I want to say thank you again to Karen for her wonderful presentation and for hanging out with us for so long for the Q&A. And with that, I want to thank
everyone, and I really want to emphasize something that Kendra said before. Please fill in that questionnaire that you were sent, and anything that you can say, positive or negative, would be extraordinarily helpful. This is the first time I'm giving the webinar. I really take the feedback seriously. We're going to do it again, and I will listen to what you have to say. And if you have ideas, I would really like to hear them. So please do fill in that survey. And with that, thank you all for hanging in there.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good day. Bye.